Stick in the costume. Well, early Halloween action.
Did you arrest Matthew Berry? Is that why he's not here?
Where is he?
I ain't gonna arrest him. I ain't trying to arrest nobody, but I'll lay down the law if I had to.
Yeah.
But for real though, this ain't even no costume.
No,
like,
it's not Halloween, so why would it be?
Yeah, y'all see me all the time. I'm on here with a hat, glasses. You see how he got the black tank top on over the shirt? Yeah. I was gonna go full Sergeant Slaughter, but I didn't think everybody was gonna know who it was. Everybody know who Hulk Hogan is, but Sergeant Slaughter faced Hulk Hogan one time for the World Championship title, so yeah, you can call me Sergeant Slaughter today.
Fantasy Football Happy Hour with Matthew Berry, served by Applebee's.
Welcome to the Fantasy Football Happy Hour and Happy Halloween. That's right, full-size candy givers. You drink for free. You are the true heroes of Halloween. Welcome back, Matthew.
Thank you, Connor. Good to be here. And to be clear, that it's not just full-size candy givers. It's anyone that doesn't give fruit, that doesn't give toothbrushes, that doesn't have their lights off and, hey, we're not home.
Yeah, when the movie's on inside, everybody knows.
No. It's Halloween. And if you can't be there for some reason, you put a ridiculously huge bowl of candy out there and say, help yourself.
Right.
Don't put
Refill
like a small little bowl and say like only take one.
Right.
No. If you can't be there, it's a free-for-all. There's rules, Connor.
There are rules.
And without rules, it's chaos.
That's right. Halloween, what a great holiday it is, and great costume over there, Fred.
Thank you very much, obviously. Yeah, Fred from Scooby-Doo. It's interesting, doing my research for this role. Fred's, there he is.
10
There's
out of
Fred.
10.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
I think, we're doing what we can with the hair.
No, it's right. You can only go so far with that.
I'm always follically challenged, even when wearing a wig. But what I will say here, I got the kerchief and the shirt, and you can't see it here, but I'm wearing the blue pants.
There we go.
The blue pants and the brown shoes. If you ever see a picture of Fred, but doing some research, there's me and my wife dressed as Daphne. We went to a Halloween party this weekend with a bunch of my buddies. Shout out to my buddy Brian wearing the tequila outfit. He's my friend that's the diehard Bengals fan. He's always getting boned.
He needs the tequila quite a bit.
That's his wife Lemma dressed as a lime, and you've got Peg and Al Bundy there, and a couple of German beer wenches, kind of like
almost like an Oktoberfest.
Yeah, it's
attendee.
an Oktoberfest kind of thing. Anyway, so a lot of fun there. But what I was going to say is when I was doing research into the role, Fred doesn't have like a lot of catchphrases.
No.
There's not like a lot.
He doesn't really have much to say in general.
He's honestly not particularly interesting. He's just sort of the leader.
Right.
Like, Velma solves everything. And, obviously Scooby and Shaggy are there for the comic relief.
Right.
And they'll fall into a bookcase that spins around and turns out that's where the ghost is or whatever. And they always stumble into everything. But really, Fred and Daphne don't bring a lot to the table, if I'm being honest with you.
It's a part of few
Which
words.
is why it's perfect for me here, honestly,
Yeah.
Connor. You bring the knowledge, and I'm just sort of here for the good looks.
Well, that's because I am a fantasy doctor.
Oh,
I am online.
On social media?
I'm watching every single injury video. I'm bringing
From
you the
afar?
analysis. Yeah, no, I don't actually. I'm not a real doctor.
Okay, got it.
Yeah,
got
no,
it.
I'm just at home.
Right, wearing
Yes.
a lab coat.
Yeah.
Your Twitter profile or your social media profile has you in a lab coat.
It's Dr. Rogers.
Okay, Dr.
Yes.
Rogers.
Yep. PhD.
Yeah, PhD. And you're immediately as I understand it, my guess is you probably immediately diagnose injuries based on like one shot of video.
I can tell from a still frame if that's a torn ACL, a meniscus trim, or a meniscus tear. And there's a big difference,
Yeah,
by the way.
for sure.
Yeah.
Because you've probably been doing this a long time.
I've been doing this a while. I stay up through all hours of the night grinding injury replays.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. People need me.
Yeah.
So
1,000%, even if they don't ask for you.
No. I will quote tweet and let them know what happened.
Yeah.
And if somebody challenges me,
they're wrong.
Yeah.
Because you've been doing this for a long time.
I've been doing this for a long time. That's
For a
why I
long
have a big
time.
following. It's how I got this job.
Yeah,
I'm usually the
100%.
host of the show, but they brought me in here really for this.
Fantastic.
So-
Absolutely. And what happens if you're wrong?
It doesn't matter. I'm never wrong.
You're never
I just move
wrong.
on to the next injury.
That's smart.
So, yep.
It's very, very,
Yeah.
very, very smart. A lot of people feel like doctors need to examine patients to have
no.
a true diagnosis.
I'm that good.
You're that good.
One still frame, and I'll tell you if you need
can
surgery,
tell
it'll
me
change your
if
life.
he's out for 4 weeks or 5 weeks or
Yeah, or
if
career
he's done
altering.
for the career altering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll do that today with your love-hate list
Okay,
as well.
please do.
Let's
Let
see
me
how
know.
you did here. So we got love-hate. It's a happy Halloween. Let's jump right into it, and we start with the running backs, of course.
Can I just real quickly before we jump into this, the last thing I'll say, and then we're going to get into actual player analysis here. But yes, and by the way, the set, very spooky.
Shout out to AJ and Johnny. AJ and Johnny, they killed
the
it.
Best. AJ crushes it.
It's phenomenal.
By the way,
Yeah.
we put it out there on Twitter that we need a name for our celebrity bartender back there as well. So we'll see what we come up with over the course of the show.
Don Guglio from our coworker John was pretty good.
That's the winner. Yeah. That might be the winner right there.
There's Don Guglio. He's got you set for all your tears
Don
and
Guglio.
Sorrows. And
Pac-Man Bones is pretty good too.
That's pretty nice, Diontae. Well done there.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah,
we'll keep him rolling.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
and there's
Don Guglio. Yeah, pretty good.
Guglio.
That's strong. That's going to be hard to top. But what I want to just say here is that when you read Love Hate today for free on rotoworld.com, NBCsports.com, I'm Company Man. When you read it for free, I just want to say thank you to me. You're welcome, America, because you know what I didn't do? I didn't do, the 10 scariest players for Halloween or 10 spooky
SEO. Trades
to make or 10 frightful performances from the year. Any like the lane, or here's who your fantasy players are dressing as this year. Like every year, I'll be honest with you, they don't do it to me here at NBC, but for a while there at ESPN, every year they would pitch me some version of that. There was one editor, I'm not going to name this person's name, but there was one editor that always pitched me on that. I'm like, that is the lamest idea I've ever heard.
It's literally for SEO.
I'm not doing that. I can't. Listen, I'm not saying I'm above selling out. I mean, I wrote Crocodile Dundee in Los Angeles.
Right.
Like, I will sell out. But it has to be for as I said this, when you're going to sell out, kids, go big.
Yeah.
Go big. Sell it for a lot of money.
Make sure it's worth it. That's the lesson of the day.
That's the lesson of the day to the kids. All right, it is Love Hate Day.
Love Hate running backs. We kick things
Rogers.
off with Alvin Kamara, who's averaging over 22 touches and over 21% target share in the 5 games Derek Carr has played this season. Now, Kamara's been through a lot physically this season. We got to hear from him and how his trainer, this very interesting trainer, is keeping him on the field.
I got a good PT that works on me, Jose Etienne. Put in a lot of hours. You can't. His nickname is Mr. Miyagi. He can't heal bones, but he get close. So even when I broke my hand, and I came to him and I'm like, man, JT is broke, dog. He like, okay, well, Sunday we'll be able to do this. I'm like, yo, do you hear me? My hand is broke. And he's like, nah, we good. We're going to figure it out. So as long as I can do that and, just try to figure out ways to get, as close to 100 as I can on Sunday, because the reality of this league, nobody's 100%. If you're 100%, then you might be Superman or something.
Now, Dr. Rogers, I'm just curious, based on your analysis of the tape, is Kamara correct there? About his broken hand and that he's not 100% healthy?
No, it didn't look like a broken hand to me personally.
Right, yeah, okay.
It looked more like a finger sprain. Now there's a difference.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. The broken hand, now that could really linger throughout the season. The sprain is something where you could play through the pain tolerance.
Got it. Okay.
So I don't agree with AK about his
trainer.
And this guy doesn't sound like he's a licensed physician, which personally bothers me.
Sure, of course.
As somebody who holds a standard on the internet.
Yeah. 1,000%. Yeah,
so,
you've got a degree.
Didn't like what I heard there.
You've got a degree. It says it in your bio and everything.
The Saints should consult with me.
I would think so. Whoever Alvin Kamara's trainer is,
seems legit.
We're not sure we believe it. Here's what we do believe: Alvin Kamara is going to have a big game this week as well. Mostly because you know what? He's playing Carolina. Like running backs that have seen at least 17 touches against the Carolina Panthers this year are averaging over 18 fantasy points per game. And they've actually given up a touchdown to a running back in every game this season. 4 different games allowing multiple running back touches, touchdowns as well. And so, as you mentioned, when you introduce this, Kamara averaging over 22 touches a game, should have a ton of success against the Panthers. By the way, we expect Derek Carr to be back this game for this game as well, which is obviously going to help the offense, right? Right, Dr. Rogers, we expect Derek Carr to come back. Right, is he coming back from a concussion?
He originally, I think, had a concussion. Oblique is with the latest on the injury report.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
it's all over the place.
Pain tolerance with the oblique. Derek Carr should be able to throw. I think the torque that he throws with will have to be limited at times, which means big day for Alvin Kamara because handing the ball off with an oblique injury is much easier than pushing the ball down the field.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Rogers, for that analysis as well. Another running back who's dealt with his share of injury issues throughout his career, but I think he should have, you tell me if I'm right or wrong on this one, but my expectation is that De'Von Achane has a big game this week. He comes in as my running back 6 this week as well. He makes the love list, Dr. Rogers. He's played 3 games with Tua Tagovailoa under center, and he's averaging over 26 fantasy points per game, 137 rushing scrimmage yards per game, I should say. And what's most important here is he's being used in the passing game. In the 3 games with Tua, 20% target share, and that's important because over 60% of his fantasy points this year have come from receiving. And it's a good matchup against Buffalo as well.
That's the key. Buffalo's defense, they've made a lot of running backs look really good this year, and it's not just the Derrick Henry game. Breece Hall got back on track against them. I think when you look at Achane in this one, he's in for a big day, and they're going to need him. They don't want Tua coming off of his concussion issues, dropping back a million times, taking these deep drops. There's a lot of quick passing game. That's going to fit the bill for Achane.
Dr. Rogers, in your expert medical opinion, should Tua have come back?
I don't want to take a hard stance on this because in our field, it's a very, very divisive, very conflicting topic on head injuries going forward.
It's interesting because I feel like when I read you on social media, you are sometimes divisive. You're not scared to take the hard stance.
It's true. I think Tua did the right thing. I think he came back. If he feels good, it's his choice. Only he could say how he's feeling. Us as physicians can only recommend and consult for you. I can't feel what your head is feeling. So.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. It's a good point. But I definitely think you should weigh in to Tua. You should tweet and message at him directly.
I've tried.
Giving him
it's weird that
advice.
He's not calling me back.
Yeah, I'm sure he will.
I texted him and he literally said, "Who is this?" And I said, "I'm a doctor," and he said, "Okay." So that was that.
Yeah, what are you going to do? All right, well, we'll keep getting there because he just doesn't understand how smart and important you are. All right.
Aaron Jones.
Let's get to Aaron Jones. Free Aaron Jones, somebody else it's interesting. You've been busy this season because there have been a lot of injuries. Aaron Jones is somebody that also missed a few games due to injury, but he's back, he's healthy, and in the 2 games since the Vikings Week 6 bye, he is obviously 100% healthy, at least to me, to my untrained eye. 95% of the team's running back touches. He's playing 84% of the snaps, Connor.
He's been incredible. Now, I'm not going to lie. When I was watching the game in London against the Jets and he didn't come back in the second half, I thought hip replacement.
Okay, sure.
Yes, I thought potentially, maybe even have to relearn how to walk again.
Yeah.
I was very, very concerned. Aaron Jones came back much quicker than any of us online. It wasn't just me. It was the entire doctor community, the entire medical community. He's been phenomenal. And the great news, Matthew, the Colts are allowing 160 scrimmage yards per game to running backs this season. Aaron Jones is going to go off.
3 of the last 4 games, they've given him at least 17 fantasy points to a running back as well. Jones fully healthy, getting a massive workload here. So a great matchup at home in prime time against the Colts on NBC and Peacock, of course. I'm a company man. He's a top 8 running back for me this week.
Some others receiving votes. How about Tony Pollard? He's got the Patriots. Tyrone Tracy against the Commanders. Now, he's in concussion protocol, so that one we'll keep an eye on. I personally will keep an eye on that one for you. You could follow me at Connor J. Rogers, licensed physician. Alexander Mattison as well against the Bengals. Let's go back to Pollard here, Matthew. He's gotten a lot of work this year. He's taken over this backfield. Patriots are vulnerable against the run.
At least 20 touches in 3 of the last 4 games. And you mentioned the Patriots. They allow the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing running backs as well. Yes, Tajay Spears will be back here, but honestly, the way the Titans move the ball, they've struggled passing the ball, obviously, but whoever's at quarterback for Tennessee, they're going to want to run the ball here, especially against the Patriots team that you can do so. So he's a top 20 play for me this week. Tyrone Tracy, when you're not here, Dr. Rogers, my co-host Connor Rogers and I are both big fans of Tyrone Tracy. We'll see. Hopefully he gets through the concussion protocol. I believe he's in stage 3 right now, but I don't know. I'm not a doctor. As we track that, though, if he can go against Washington, it's a nice matchup for him. They give up 5.3 yards per carry to opposing running backs. That's second highest in the NFL. 80% of the team rushes for Tyrone Tracy in Week 8. Handled all but 5 of the running back touches, and they had 27 of them in this game. So Tyrone Tracy has clearly overtaken this backfield. Top 25 play for me, and it's not pretty. You won't enjoy doing this. But if you are desperate, Alexander Mattison, you heard me, Alexander Mattison for the Raiders has taken over this backfield such as it is, right? In the 2 games since Zamir White returned to the lineup, Alexander Madison's outtouched him 45-6. 45-6. He's also got a 13% target share over the past 3 games. Top 30 play for me in a decent matchup against Cincinnati.
All right, let's go over to the hate list here. Javonte Williams. Matthew, how many times on this show all year have we talked about Baltimore's run defense? They're allowing 3.2 yards per carry to running backs, second lowest in the league. You cannot run on the Ravens.
No, you certainly can't, right? Only one running back this season has seen more than 16 touches against Baltimore, right? Just teams abandon the run. And since the start of last year, when Javonte Williams has fewer than 17 touches, he's got one game with more than 12 points. One game. So again, somebody that needs a lot of volume to be efficient. He's 43rd among qualified running backs in terms of fantasy points per touch. What's that stat tell you? Basically, he needs a lot of touches because he doesn't score a lot per touch, so he needs a lot of touches to get you somewhere, usable in fantasy football. And unfortunately, as you mentioned, the Ravens, number one run defense in the NFL. Teams don't run against them. They abandon the run. Just hard to see Javonte Williams doing anything really productive this week. He's outside my top 30 in week 9.
Rachaad White barely sneaks into the top 30. He's got the Chiefs. Their run defense has been excellent. Here's the big thing, Matthew. We always talk about Rachaad White needing to be a volume guy. That volume is heading in the wrong direction.
Yeah. I mean, we saw some signs of life from Rachaad White previously, last week. But I think it's going to be a different story on Monday night against the Chiefs, right? Part of the appeal of Rachaad White is how he uses the passing game, right? But look at this: the Chiefs have allowed zero receiving touchdowns to a running back this season. They also allow the fourth lowest catch rate to opposing running backs. So there's no mystery here. Rachaad White outside my top 25. His percentage of team rush attempts has declined now in 4 straight games. So 89% of his 2 games since he returned has come as a receiving running back, right? He's just not getting the volume as a runner. It's basically been all in the passing game. And as we've talked about here, Kansas City really good against pass-catching running backs. He's outside my top 25.
Jacksonville's running backs both make the hate list. Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby. The Eagles' run defense has really gotten right the last 4 weeks. They are allowing the 3rd fewest points per game to running backs during that stretch.
Yeah, by the way, Jacksonville's also like the 3rd biggest underdog this week. They're more than a touchdown underdog to the Eagles here. So game script doesn't favor either of these guys, but especially not Tank Bigsby. He's just not involved in the passing game. Any thoughts, Doctor? I know we haven't seen Travis Etienne in a couple of weeks here, but any thoughts from the tape you saw, a couple of online clips that you saw a couple of weeks ago about Etienne's health returning this week?
Yeah, I'm feeling optimistic about his health. I'm not feeling optimistic about his play. And
yeah,
maybe
sure.
One is feeding into the other right now. So I think as you have 2 guys there in a split work against a good run defense, this screams disaster.
In the 5 games they've played together, weeks 1 through 5, Travis Etienne averaging under 12 fantasy points per game. Tank Bigsby under 9 fantasy points per game. Maybe one of those guys could fall into the end zone, but it's worth noting that this entire year there's only been 2 running backs that have scored more than 12.5 fantasy points against the Eagles, and both of them saw at least 18 touches against Philly. Hard to see either of these guys getting that kind of workload, given the fact that it is kind of a true 50-50 split here.
We move over to the pass catchers for love-hate, and we start with the love, and I'll tell you who's loving that his receivers are back. That's Sean McVay. We got to hear from McVay on starting Puka Nacua despite limited practice throughout the week this week.
He went and had a workout session where he ran routes, and did a great job. His movement looked good. I talked to him, and I said, do you want to try to give this thing a shot? And he said, yes. Once you tease me, you're going, all right? And so that was kind of really how that ended up coming about. But he had shown that he was ready for that performance, and this guy's mindset, his mentality, he's a war daddy. He's a stud. I love his play energy and what he brings.
By the way, Connor, just to echo Coach McVay's thoughts there, I can't tell you how many times I've said to my wife, listen, once you tease me, you're going. I mean, it is what it is. I get it. Yep. I get it with McVay and Puka, because I've used that same phrase many, many times. Yeah. And just like Puka Nacua, my wife has met the occasion.
With limited practice.
With limited practice or reps. Yeah, she's a gamer. There's no mystery there. Make no mistake. No mystery is at that. And there's also no mystery about what you're doing with Puka Nacua this week. You are starting him. He is a top 10 play for me. I have him at wide receiver 7 this week. His first game back, 41% of his routes. He was targeted on 41% of his routes. And what's most exciting is they're so good at using him after the catch, right? 49% of his receiving yards, almost half of his receiving yards this year have come after the catch. Important to note that because the Seahawks, they allow the 5th most yards after the catch per reception to opposing wide receivers over the last 4 weeks. In fact, the Hawks have allowed the 6th most fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. So wheels up for Puka Nacua and the Rams offense this week against Seattle.
And the same could be said for Chris Olave. He's got the Panthers. We talked about it with Alvin Kamara, how poor this Panthers defense is right now. Chris Olave, a top 15 play for you, Matthew. 37% target share last week. That was his first full game without Rashid Shaheed. He's the guy in this passing attack, and Derek Carr should be back.
Yeah, which is certainly exciting for the entire Saints offense. Olave should be targeted early and often. He's had 4 different games this year with at least a 25% target share. And as you mentioned, Connor, 37% last week, right, in his first game without Shaheed. So those 4 games where he's gotten at least a 25% target share, he's averaging 17.2 fantasy points per game. And, oh, by the way, let me just look at the schedule here. Oh, it's Carolina. Nothing spooky about that. All the treats for Carolina. You see what I did there? See, I tied in the Halloween theme, Connor. That's what I did.
Pretty good.
Instead of trick, I said treat.
The full-size candy bar of defenses.
Full-size candy bar, exactly, of defenses. It's the bonanza. It's the one block down the house where they're just like, you know, the mom comes out with like buckets of stuff. Here, why don't you take a whole pack of candy bars?
Half your knapsack's full when you leave.
Oh, yeah. Here, take more. What you want? I'll give you one of each.
You go put on a different costume and then come back down.
Yeah. That's what this is as well. That's what Carolina is. They're bottom 5 in the NFL in receptions, in yards, and touchdowns allowed on deep passes. We know Derek Carr especially loves to throw it deep to Chris Olave.
DeVonta Smith next up here. He's wide receiver 15. Very quietly, Matthew. He's finished as a top 25 wide receiver in 5 of his 6 games this year. The matchup with Jacksonville, they're giving up a ton of receptions through the air.
Everyone was panicking about DeVonta Smith like 2 weeks ago, and we were like, last week, going into last week's game, he was on the love list. We said, don't worry about it. It was just a fluky game the week before, and sure enough, had the big game. Cursed his brains out, by the way. I don't know if you saw that on Twitter or if you were too busy analyzing footage.
I don't miss anything online.
No, I know you don't.
I'm actually,
24/7.
it's bothering me that I'm here hosting the show. I should be online.
You should be online.
Yeah.
I don't know how you have time to see patients given how online you are.
I don't. That's the thing. I don't ever see a patient.
Right.
We're what do they call it? Televisit?
Okay.
Yeah, that's all
you're doing. You're on one screen here and then another just to make sure you don't miss a tweet. You are Johnny on the spot. There's no question, Dr. Rogers. What I will say is that, so you probably saw DeVonta Smith scoring last week and cursing up a storm. He was mic'd up. It's a very funny clip. And he should do that again this week against the Jaguars. They're also bottom 5 in terms of receptions and yards allowed to opposing wide receivers. By the way, they're also, since week 3, tied for the 2nd most touchdowns allowed to the slot. It's worth noting that since DeVonta Smith came back in week 6, 54% of his targets has come via the slot. Dallas Goedert banged up. We expect him to line up a decent amount there this week as well. So DeVonta Smith, top 15 play for me in week number 9.
We move over to a tight end, and Evan Engram. Since returning from injury, Engram has been targeted on a team-high 27% of his routes, Matthew. This is Trevor Lawrence's consistent guy, his safety blanket. He just needs to be on the field. Now Christian Kirk with the shoulder injury, which, by the way, I diagnosed before anyone else did.
No, you had
online.
that first. You absolutely had that first.
I saw that, and I said that is a season-ending shoulder injury. This is going to impact the trade deadline. I told the Baltimore Ravens right away, you have to pivot to Diontae Johnson.
Yeah,
they listened.
Which is smart. Your sources are second to none, Doctor. There's no question about it. You were absolutely first online with that, so credit to you. It's unfortunate major media ignored you.
They did, but I texted you and I said Evan Engram on the love list, no Christian Kirk going forward.
Right, correct. Along with, by the way, as you've also noted, Gabe Davis and Brian Thomas Jr. both banged up. We don't know if they're going to be able to play this week. We'll see. But even if they can go, they may be less than 100%. Evan Engram should be the focal point of this Jaguars offense. And since the start of last season, when Engram gets at least 7 targets, and he should obviously get at least 7 targets in this matchup at Philadelphia, he's averaging 15.2 fantasy points per game. And there's 86% of Christian Kirk's targets came from the slot. Why do I bring that up? Because he had almost 20% target share. So this 20% target share, of which 86% of those targets came from the slot, which is obviously where Engram runs the majority of his routes. Bottom line, there's a lot of targets available for Evan Engram. He should have a big week as an underdog to Philadelphia on the road. He's a top 5 tight end play for me in week 9.
Some others receiving votes, and we'll go through this list one by one. Tank Dell against the Jets on Thursday Night Football tonight. Matthew, makes your top 25 wide receivers. He's the guy. I diagnosed this. Stephon Diggs, unfortunately, torn ACL. That'll cost his season. Nico Collins not eligible to return off of IR. Tank Dell should see a lot of work through the air for the Texans.
Here's the entire list of wide receivers on the Texans that are healthy that have more than 10 targets this year. Tank Dell. That's the list. That's the list. So he should see a lot of looks tonight against the Jets. And in the 9 games where he's had at least 6 or more targets, he's had at least 17 fantasy points in 7 of them. I am as a top 25 play today. Hey, Josh Downs also makes the other receiving votes list. With the news that comeback player of the year, Joe Flacco, is now the starting quarterback of the Colts. That is good news. In the 3 games that he's played with Joe Flacco, he's had at least 7 receptions in all of them, a 27% target share, averaging over 19 fantasy points per game. As long as Flacco's under center, Josh Downs is a top 20 player. He's a wide receiver, too, as well. It's also a nice matchup against the Vikings, as Minnesota is bottom 5 in terms of receptions and yards given up to the slot, which is where Downs runs a lot of his routes. Jakobi Meyers, he's played 3 games without Devontae Adams, 25% target share. He's going to get a ton of looks. Khalil Shakir is very quietly getting a ton of looks from Josh Allen. Over the last 2 weeks, almost a 27% target share, Connor, and he's had double-digit fantasy points very quietly in every game this year but 1. So while Keon Coleman and Amari Cooper battle it out on the outside, Shakir's getting the underneath stuff.
He absolutely is. He's been the consistency in that offense where it's been a lot of highs and lows for their wide receivers. Sam LaPorta makes the love list, Matthew, a top 12 tight end here, tight end 11 for you. First game without Jameson Williams, a season-high 33% target share. They looked for him in some trick plays. Listen, LaPorta has not met expectations this year, but a lot of tight ends haven't. It feels like this could be a big second half for him.
Yeah, and it's a nice matchup with the Packers. 3 of the last 4 weeks, they've given up at least 12 fantasy points to an opposing tight end. So you see, yes, they're getting LaPorta more involved, no Jameson Williams. This is an important matchup in the division, so expect Dan Campbell and Ben Johnson to pull out all the stops. And they're going to need big games from everyone to beat the Packers. That includes Sam LaPorta. Top 12 play for me this week.
We go over to the hate list led by new Baltimore Raven Diontae Johnson. We always see some guys take a little while to get assimilated into their new offense. On top of that, Matthew, Denver, his matchup is allowing the 4th fewest fantasy points per game to wide receivers this season.
It's a bad matchup. We have no idea what his role is going to be. You think about Amari Cooper in his first game with the Bills. He ran 12 routes. DeAndre Hopkins, his first game with the Chiefs, he ran 14 routes. So now you've got Diontae Johnson going to the Ravens the same week. He's not going to know very much the playbook. And unlike Cooper and Hopkins, they have I guess you could say this with Cooper on some level, but I would argue that Diontae Johnson goes to a team with more loaded talent than either of the previous 2 guys I just mentioned in terms of
run game.
With a run game, the multiple tight end sets they run, having both Andrews and Isaiah Likely out there, Zay Flowers getting some love. Obviously, you've got Rachaad Bateman, Nelson Aguilar still gets a couple looks.
Week,
yeah, there's just so many mouths to feed. So honestly, I'm not crazy about Diontae Johnson for this week. He's outside my top 45 for the week. But more importantly, he's also just as we look, I know you guys talked about the trade yesterday. I posted something on social media just as a reaction. I was off yesterday. But so you can go check that out if you want at Matthew Berry TMR on all forms of social media. But I will say that if you missed that real quickly, hate this for fantasy for Diontae Johnson. They have a lot of mouths to feed. He was getting a 27% target share with the Panthers. I don't think there's any way he gets close to that with the Ravens. And despite having a significant upgrade in quarterback and offensive efficiency, scoring opportunities, there's just so many mouths to feed in that Ravens offense. Diontae Johnson will, by the end of the year, have a couple of big games with the Ravens. Just trying to figure out when those are going to be is going to be hard, and I think this hurts Zay Flowers as well.
We had an interesting debate about that yesterday. We were trying to decide who's the receiver you'd rather have for the rest of the year. Is it Zay Flowers, who gets a lot of the scheme touches, a lot of screens, or Diontae Johnson, who's a more natural route runner right now? In fantasy, who do you think has a better chance to have the bigger output?
I'm still going to say Zay Flowers.
Yeah,
I think they're both really. I think they're all really talented, but Zay's been there. He knows the offense, and to your point, they scheme touches for him.
Monken loves him clearly.
Yeah. So, and there's obviously a connection with Lamar, and so Diontae Johnson, another weapon for Lamar Jackson. It's exciting for the Ravens and for Lamar, but you went from having a locked-in kind of top 20 wide receiver to now who's on the wide receiver 3-4 border range. That's just sort of does he score this week? it's much more volatile.
Calvin Ridley next up on our hate list here. He's outside the top 30 wide receivers. Yes, he had the monster game with Mason Rudolph last week. It's no guarantee Rudolph starts. Also, Christian Gonzalez will most likely shadow him in this game.
Yeah, shout out to my friend Mike Clay, who does a great job with his wide receiver cornerback matchups. He's expecting a shadow on Christian Gonzalez. I expect that to be the case as well. You think about some of the wide receivers that have faced Christian Gonzalez. Jamar Chase, Brandon Ayuk, Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, Garrett Wilson, all had under 70 receiving yards against Christian Gonzalez. And so Calvin Ridley, who's caught only 33% of his targets from Will Levis this year. We're not really sure as of this taping who's going to start for Tennessee, but it might be Will Levis. Either way, whether it's Mason Rudolph or Will Levis, just doesn't – I know there's really encouraging signs from Calvin Ridley last week because of the production and the usage and, just getting all the looks. And I do think that will be more the norm going forward. But this week, he's outside my top 30. Just too tough a matchup and just not a ton of confidence in the passing game. I think they go run heavy, which is one of the reasons why we mentioned Tony Pollard earlier in the show.
Yeah, New England's run defense, they've been one of the worst in football against outside zone. That's Tony Pollard's bread and butter. So I'm with you. I love the run game, hate the pass game for them. Jordan Addison, next up on our hate list, is one of the most jarring stats of the entire fantasy season, Matthew. He's yet to have a game with more than 3 catches this season.
Yeah.
They drafted him in the first round a little over a year ago.
Is he Jordan Addison or is he Jordan Dropperson?
Oh!
Hey-oh! You see what I did there?
That's a zinger.
Oh, yeah. Woo,
Even Fred on Scooby-Doo couldn't come up with that with his limited
Ruh-roh. Anyway, yeah, Jordan Addison. He's had one game this year with a 20% target share. Oh, by the way, that's without T.J. Hawkinson, who's expected to return this week. Remember, T.J. Hawkinson had a 24% target share for these same Vikings as well, so they're going to want to get Hawk involved. You already heard me talk up Aaron Jones. We expect him to touch the ball a lot. Obviously, Justin Jefferson's going to get him. We've seen some, a couple of moments here from Jalen Naylor, which is nice as well. And so the Colts, feels like the way you attack Indianapolis is on the ground. They're actually top 10 over the last month. They're top 10 in terms of fewest fantasy points allowed to opposing wide receivers. Some of that's because they're playing well in the secondary, honestly, but some of that's because teams aren't throwing against the Colts because they can just run on them. And that's what I expect to happen here. I think it's a lot of Aaron Jones. I think they get Jefferson and Hawkinson theirs, but Jordan Addison outside my top 40 for the week.
Tucker Kraft, our tight end here on the hate list. Detroit's allowing the second fewest fantasy points per game to tight ends, Matthew. This is also a team, a Packers offense, that we don't know the status of Jordan Love.
Right.
And they love handing the ball off anyway.
They do. I mean, you'll see a decent amount of Josh Jacobs here, but whether it's Malik Willis or Jordan Love under center, and by the way, here's something that makes me nervous. It could be both. Jordan Love is sitting there talking about how he thinks he might be able to go. I know you have a diagnosis as to whether he can go or not.
Yeah.
You've
I already gave the Packers my full written report.
Right, exactly.
Whether they actually listen to me,
Yeah.
and you'd be surprised, or maybe you're not surprised. Many teams do go by my reports.
I'm sure, of course.
Consultation.
I know. You just don't want to reveal it online.
No, I have to sign an NDA with the teams.
100%. So we'll wait to see what the Packers do with your recommendations here. But whether it's Jordan Love or Malik Willis, the fact is it easily could be both. There's a chance that Jordan Love starts the game and then re-aggravates and then Malik Willis comes in. It's just hard to say either way. Hard to get excited about Tucker Kraft. I know he's been a tight end one this season, and maybe you don't have a better choice because the position is so gross. But 3 straight games now with a target share lower than 13%. It's not a good matchup against Detroit, right? Lions allow the second fewest fantasy points to opposing tight ends. They have allowed 35 yards to a tight end once this season. That's it. Only one tight end has gotten over 35 yards against the against the Lions this year. And so with Tucker Kraft, he's just basically very touchdown dependent, which he could do. I mean, he's definitely scored some this year, but you'd feel better about it if Love was in there, not Willis. There's no guarantee, even if Love starts, that he finishes the game. So outside my top 12 for the week, Tucker Kraft.
Indiana is ranked number 13 and undefeated as they head out on the road to face Michigan State in East Lansing. Find out if the Spartans can put an end to the streak live this Saturday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Peacock. We're taking our first break. When we're back, love-hate continues with the quarterbacks right after this.
First Halloween costume you remember wearing, and what's your favorite scary movie?
Last question.
Man,
I'm not a big Halloween guy. I was Bill Belichick one year. I think he'll appreciate that. Maybe he won't because I were playing on defense.
That was Seahawks coach Mike McDonald undressing as Belichick. That is an alternate Bill Belichick. That's our show researcher, Big Show, bringing out his Belichick costume. Well done, Big Show.
What else we got? Yep. Oh, look at this. Okay, so Audio Adam, his real name is Adam Wise, and this is his son Kyler, who, for some reason, we're just finding out his son's name is Kyler.
I've worked with Adam for 3 years. I did not know this.
Yeah, he's very, very circumspect.
Do you think he changed his name to Kyler when Ride or Die came out?
He might have. He's very dedicated to the show.
Yes.
Which, you know what, I admire that. That's the story I'm going with, is that Adam changed his kid's name for the show. This is a real Super Dave on Twitter, FF Happy Hour, our Olympic ray gun. This is amazing. So there you go. Of course, everyone knows Jay Croucher and Ray Gun, both from Australia, both proud exports.
That's why he's Jay Gunn.
Yes, he's Jay Gunn.
We also have a Fantasy Life costume here from Mike Campana.
Let's
nice
go.
job, Mike. Well done.
That's an old school Fantasy Life t-shirt.
I was going to
so
say, it took me a second to realize.
Yeah. It's,
you guys have really been on the come up.
Yeah, Fantasy Life, we started out as a merch store and has grown into this whole thing now with the the media and the content and the tools. But that's one of our first shirts. So Mike Campana has been there for a while. Appreciate you, longtime fan. Much love, Mike.
A lot of players, including George Kittle as the Mandalorian.
This is the way.
With his wife Claire, as Princess Leia. That is a wildly impressive costume.
It's unbelievable,
like
although
an
in fairness,
expensive costume.
It just feels like, if I can Star Wars nerd out a bit. I mean, Leia and Mandalorian really shouldn't be in the same.
I was actually going to ask that. I'm not the biggest Star Wars guy, but I know that.
Yeah. I believe they are different timelines. I'm much more Marvel nerd than Star Wars nerd, but I'm almost positive that the timelines don't totally interact.
Christian McCaffrey and his wife, he's the Tin Man with Dorothy.
Insert joke here.
Oh. God, it's too good. Macaulay Culkin with maybe the winner of Halloween as Joe Burrow. And he really leaned into it.
He's fantastic.
That is just so well done.
I gotta tell you, you know what? I'll get into Macaulay Culkin in a second. And then here's Jared and Kristen Goff going as Ricky and Carly Bobby from Talladega Nights.
They nailed that one.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah. I just piss excellence. I wake up in the morning and I piss excellence.
If you ain't first, you're last.
Yeah. If you ain't first, you're last. Yeah. It's fantastic. What was I just going to say about Macaulay Culkin? By the way, and Kieran. Kieran is unbelievable in Succession, if you ever watch that show.
Yep.
But Macaulay, when you're a kid actor and when you're a famous kid actor, there's a lot of different ways you can go. And we've seen this over the years. And Macaulay Culkin, as a child, was in, the biggest movie of all time as Home Alone, and it's still whatever, 25 years later. I don't know how long ago it came out, but 25, 30 years later.
It's generally a classic.
It's not only is it a classic, but it is still one of the highest grossing comedies of all time.
Right.
And so Macaulay Culkin is just sort of kind of had this, continued resurgence. I don't know. He's an easy guy to root for, at least for me.
No, he is. He's interesting because he never really was just this star as an adult on purpose, it felt like. He's just I'm good just kind of living this out.
Yeah.
And I think I respect that more than a lot of the other avenues you can go down.
1,000%. And he sort of embraced it. And
right.
Anyway,
the Joe Burrow thing is just a perfect example of it.
Fantastic. I follow him on social media. He's a fun follow. Highly recommend.
You think he plays fantasy football?
I wish. He doesn't follow me, so
maybe not. Then.
Maybe not. Of course, you can play fantasy football, not follow me necessarily. But I am mostly familiar with pretty much every celebrity that plays fantasy football. I've never heard his name come up as somebody who does. Doesn't mean he doesn't, but I'm just saying, generally speaking, at some point I've sort of heard.
They're very vocal about it,
or somebody knows somebody that
I
know enough. My brother is a manager. He's in Hollywood, and so I used to be in Hollywood, so I have a lot of friends that are agents, producers, and that kind of stuff. So I know, anyway. I have not heard, but we'd love to get him involved. If Macaulay Culkin's watching, open invitation to any of my leagues next year.
We continue love-hate with the quarterbacks. Sorry, Macaulay Culkin is not led by Joe Burrow, but it is led by future Hall of Famer, future Super Bowl champion, Jayden Daniels. And why,
His
Matthew?
official name
Three of the past 4 quarterbacks to face the Giants have gone off in fantasy.
Including Joe Burrow, Macaulay Culkin. So there you go. We got to mention in there as well. You see it right there. Russell didn't go, but whatever. Actually, Geno, Burrow, Hurts all had big quarterbacks. The most important part, the 3 quarterbacks I just mentioned, Burrow, Smith, and Hurts, they all had 30% or more of their points come from rushing, which is obviously a big part of Jayden Daniels' game. In his last 5 healthy games, Jayden Daniels has had at least 280 yards of total offense. I know it was kind of a field goal fest the last time they faced the Giants, but I think Jayden Daniels is a much more complete quarterback, much more in command of this offense. I think the Giants aren't as good as they were earlier in the season. Their defense is still playing well, but yeah, I mean, name a hotter quarterback in football than Jayden Daniels right now. He's my QB too. And by the way, this is interesting. But I was watching, I was at a bar yesterday, and they had a bar restaurant, and they had ESPN on the TV. And I saw a couple of people, including my friend Mike Tannenbaum. Shout out to Mike. And they were talking about potential. They were doing this, trick or treat segment or whatever, and whatever.
For a brand.
Yeah. And anyway, but like one of the treats that Mike Tannenbaum said basically was that Jayden Daniels is in the MVP conversation. Like he's a favorite for it, one of the favorites for it. And I was just like, that's what I had my future bet.
Right, 16-1.
16-1. That's
Seemed
what we did that.
off.
Yeah, I'm just saying. Anyway, on Tuesday's futures. My point being, I'm not the only one saying Jayden Daniels is in the mix for MVP. That's the kind of season he's having. He's a legit candidate. I don't know if he's going to win, but he's a legit candidate.
Yeah, I mean, what he's done to that franchise as a whole, how could you argue against it right now?
You can't.
Kirk Cousins next up on our list. Over the past 4 weeks, Dallas is allowing about 23 points per game to quarterbacks. That is a top 5 marker right now. It is exactly 22.8, Matthew. The Cowboys are a mess from front to back on defense.
It's a mystery as to why they've been so bad, but they really have. Over the last month, the Cowboys allow the 4th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Since week 5, they're allowing touchdown passes at the 4th highest rate. So give me some Kirk Cousins this week. Falcons have a top 3 implied team total. It's actually 52 is the over-under. That's the highest game on the slate in week number 9. This game is in Atlanta in the Dome. So, yeah, Kirk, who's throwing it all over the place against a Cowboys defense that just hasn't shown up. I'll find out which meddling kids are responsible for this. But in the meantime, start Kirk Cousins this week. He's a top 6 play for me.
Another mystery has been Patrick Mahomes' fantasy season. He's been on the hate list at times this year, but a turnaround this week, love list. The Todd Bowles secondary is the cure. I mean, over the past 4 weeks, they rank 31st in pass defense.
Yeah, I mean, like you want to talk about like kind of like a crazy, the case of the missing fantasy points. Yeah, it seems super weird to be like, hey, Patrick Mahomes is on the love list because, he's freaking Patrick Mahomes. But on the other hand, like, not only can I put him on the love list, I have to justify putting him on the love list
QB8
because the truth is that he hasn't been a top 20 fantasy quarterback this year. Fantasy-wise, despite the fact that they're undefeated, Patrick Mahomes just hasn't produced a ton of great fantasy games. He's been outside the top 20, but he's getting better. 2 of the last 3 games, he's had at least 38 pass attempts. First 4 weeks of the season, he had only 1 game with over 30 pass attempts. So they're starting to throw a lot more. The addition of DeAndre Hopkins, I think, helps this offense. And, of course, as you mentioned it, facing Tampa Bay is a cure for any passing attack. Over the last 4 weeks, only 1 team allows more passing yards per game than your Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They've allowed at least 4 touchdown passes in 3 of the past 4 games. So Mahomes should have a big game against Tampa.
Is there any hope for Mahomes drafters that are still holding on that he could become a fringe QB1 down the stretch of this season, Matthew, once Hopkins is full go, or is that kind of a prayer at this point?
He's Patrick Mahomes. Of course,
Right.
anything's
But it's been
possible.
a while.
It has absolutely been a while. I mean, I think it's been since like middle of last year where he's been like, okay. But he's Patrick Mahomes. Like he's got I would never say, let me put it this way. You'll never catch me on national television, dressed goofy or not, ever saying that something is beyond the ability of Patrick Mahomes. So is there hope for people that have him on his roster that he suddenly becomes the fantasy superstar that he has been for so much of his career? Of course there is. And I do think they're going to get Isaiah Pacheco back soon. They're adding DeAndre Hopkins. Hopefully they get Juju back as well. And so now suddenly this offense starts to look a little bit better. Xavier Worthy is getting better. He's expanding his route tree. As they're getting closer to the end of the season, they're going to start to use Travis Kelce more. So, yes. And by the way, the other thing is Mahomes is starting to run a little bit more. I don't know if you've seen that, but he's actually starting to get you a little more fantasy points with his legs. Scored the rushing touchdown the other week. So, yes. And it starts this week as he's QB 8 for me.
Some others receiving votes. We'll go through these one by one. Bo Nix, Matthew Stafford, Derek Carr. Bo Nix has got Baltimore, Matthew. That is the biggest pass funnel defense in the entire league.
I mean, it's...
best run defense, worst pass defense.
Yeah, that's exactly right. 7 of the 8 quarterbacks that have faced the Ravens this year have thrown for at least 269 yards. Very quietly, Bo Nix is the 10th best quarterback in fantasy since week 3. In fact, he's had at least 20 fantasy points in 3 of the last 4 games. So, yeah, Bo Nix. By the way, Matthew Stafford, again, healthy Cooper Kupp, healthy Puka Nacua. He's had 13 games since the start of last year with both guys active on the field at the same time. He's averaging 17.4 fantasy points per game. We've already talked about the Seahawks defense that's allowed multiple touchdown passes in 3 of their past 4 games. Stafford's a top 15 play for me. And Derek Carr, again, it's his first game back, and he's on the road, but it's Carolina, who has allowed multiple touchdown passes in every game this year but 1. They're actually giving the 5th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. So, Derek Carr, welcome back.
Hate list is headline for Thursday Night Football. C.J. Stroud, the worst passer rating of Stroud's career, came against the Jets last season. I know that was a different Jets defense, but the other side of it, Matthew, no Nico Collins, no Stephon Diggs, short week, they're on the road. It's a tough draw for the incredibly talented young quarterback C.J. Stroud.
Playing on a short week without Nico Collins, without Stephon Diggs. Zoinks! Zoinks, I say, Connor. Zoinks! There's only been one quarterback that scored 12 points or more against your Jets this season. And those quarterbacks, there's only 2, I should say. Those quarterbacks, Josh Allen, Russell Wilson, each had a rushing touchdown. C.J. Stroud doesn't really run, right? Teams that face the Jets this year are averaging the 4th fewest pass attempts, partially because their defense is so good, and partially because they can't stop the run. So again, like Big Joe Mixon Day, he's outside my top 20, C.J. Stroud tonight.
And Tua falls into this bracket as well. He makes the top 20, but barely at QB 17. Buffalo's been good against quarterbacks. And Matthew, when you watch this offense last week as Tua returns, Mike McDaniel wanted the ball out of his hands quick. They didn't take a ton of shots down the field, so it felt like they were being careful with Tua. And we know he's just not going to run anymore.
Certainly not. By the way, it's a tough matchup against the Bills on the road at Buffalo. Top 10 in terms of lowest touchdown rate, yards per pass attempt, and passer rating against to opposing quarterbacks. Just in general, it's a tough matchup for quarterbacks, and it's especially a tough matchup for Tua. He's of the last 5 games that Tua's played against the Bills, he scored under 14 fantasy points in 4 of them. So outside my top 15 for the week.
Yeah, Buffalo's been a house of horrors for him. All right, Matthew, it's time to choose your lineup.
It is time to choose your lineup, and my apologies to my good friends at Jameson for dressing the way I am, but either way, it is still time to choose your lineup, brought to you by our friends at Jameson. Join our unofficial call to try to get pro football to Dublin. Visit jamesonsports.com for more information. All right, now here's a quarterback and 3 flex plays that could help you win your Week 9 matchup, and we start with Geno Smith in that game against the Rams. We expect a little bit of a shootout here. As much as Seattle struggles, so do the Rams defensively. They give up touchdown passes at the 3rd highest rate. They're also allowing the 2nd most yards per pass attempt this year. Geno's a top 10 play for me. How about Chase Brown when we get to running backs? Over the past 2 games, he's taken over this backfield. He's got 71% of the Bengals running back rushes over the last 2 games. And it's worth noting that every single game this year, the Raiders have allowed at least 13 fantasy points to a running back. Chase Brown very much on the flex radar. How about Cortland Sutton as we move to wide receiver at Baltimore? We just talked about Bo Nix, right? They're going to take deep shots because he can't run against the Ravens. You can throw against them because no team has allowed more receptions or yards on deep passes than the Baltimore Ravens. I mention that because for Cortland Sutton, 47% of his targets this year have come on deep passes. Bo Nix certainly going to take a couple shots down the field for Sutton on Sunday. And finally at tight end, Zach Ertz of my beloved Commanders. Don't look now, but he's now got a 20% target share in the season. That's 7th highest among all tight ends. Jayden Daniels, the truth, is looking for him. 3 straight games for Zach Ertz with double-digit fantasy points and in a great matchup with the Giants. He's a top 10 play for me this week.
The world's fastest thoroughbreds come together this weekend in Del Mar to compete for the title of world champion at the Breeders' Cup. Catch the action from Southern California Friday afternoon on USA Network and Saturday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern on NBC and Peacock. We are taking our last break. When we're back, it's time for Last Call. We got our Thursday Night Football preview on the way with Jets, Texans, including our best bets right after this. DraftKings Sportsbook is the #1 place to bet touchdowns, and new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Download the app and use promo code Barry when you sign up. DraftKings Sportsbook, the crown is yours. It's time for Last Call. Let's take a look at the most bet props for Thursday Night Football, Jets, Texans on DraftKings.
Yeah.
Tank Dell receptions over 4.5. That's a standard line. That's -125. Kaimi Fairbairn field goals made over 1.5. That's -165. Now Garrett Wilson receiving yards 50+, -210. Joe Mixon rushing yards both 60+ and 80+ on the board here. Matthew, what are you looking at in this very interesting game where the Jets are favored?
How about Danielle Hunter over 0.25 sacks? Just a quarter of a sack. Listen, he's had 3 straight games with a sack, 4 total in that 3-game stretch. Rodgers just isn't mobile the way he used to be. No. He likes to hang into plays a little bit too long. The offensive line has struggled. Jets have now allowed multiple sacks in 5 of 8 games this year.
I like that one a lot. I'm going with Joe Mixon, and this is going to sound crazy, over 20.5 rushing attempts. He's gotten 25 carries his last 2 games. When he was healthy week 1, he got 30 carries.
Yeah.
The Texans wanted to run the ball when they had Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs, and Tank Dell. Now they only have Tank Dell. It's a short week, so maybe they do want to get one of the other running backs involved, but I think Bobby Slowick looks at his team, Matthew, and says Joe Mixon is the engine of our offense.
Yeah, I mean, they don't really want to be throwing to any of these guys. I do think, as you see down there, Dalton Schultz is like suddenly on the mid-tier tight end 2 radar. You don't love the matchup, but he's kind of the only guy. And I have Tank Dell as a top 25 play. Should be a low-scoring game. You're obviously starting, the main wide receivers and Breece Hall on the Jet side of the ball. Two quick things, by the way. A lot of Twitter doctors out there are actually pretty good. There's some that aren't great, but
it was just a bit.
But
no hard feelings.
But Stefania Bell is the gold standard, my old friend.
I consider her a real.
She's she's the best. Have a great and safe Halloween. For Connor, I'm Matthew. Go and be merry. We'll see you tomorrow. Spook out. Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and RotoWorld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest RotoWorld fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.